Well, hello there ladies and gents, how the very devil are you? Andy here, and as you can probably tell already, my ears did not manage to kill me. Funny that I say that as I'm driving past the Itzehoe Hospital. But yes, I managed to survive the surgery, survive the chopping off of my ear, the fettling of my ear's innards. Thankfully, with hearing, feeling in my face, ability to stand up straight, and an at least semi-symmetrical face intact. And as I am today heading into work on the bike, I thought, why not take this opportunity to bring you guys along and have a little bit of an update, tell you how everything went, what happened, and how it's going now. I would also at this early juncture just like to let you know that this video is in fact sponsored by Videoproc Vlogger, and furthermore, the video itself has been edited completely on the totally 100% free video editing software from Videoproc. Check the link in the top right to see my full review of the Vlogger video editing software, see how I got on, see what I liked, see what I didn't like. Before I get stuck in, I would like to give huge thanks to all of you amazing people out there who have sent an absolute barrage of well-wishing, questions about how I'm doing, questions about how the recovery's going. Just the wave of warmth and caring was immense, and I'm happy to say it really helped during the recovery, during the time when I couldn't do anything, to know that everybody had my back and you guys were there for me, so thank you so very much. Oh, it. Thank you. So very slick. So yeah, the surgery was a blinding success apparently. My titanium hearing prosthetic is still sitting nicely and appears to be working fine, as I can still hear. And I'm also very happy to report that the numbness on the side of my face, I'm not talking about the facial paralysis that was a potential risk, but more just the numbness of the flesh around the cut area. Last time, my face was numb, kind of to the edge of my eyebrows, to the top of my cheek. It just felt like I had a rubber ear stuck on the side of my head because it was all completely dead. Whereas this time, almost none of that, a little bit tingly on the tip of my ear, but no actual loss of sensation in the face at all. So that's very nice. Happy about that. The surgeon said he chopped away a bit of extra scar tissue that was left from the healing of the last operation, and that could potentially have positive effects to my hearing ability. And to be honest, I think if anything, it is maybe a tiny little bit better than it was last time round. So that also is a big thumbs up. The potential for the hearing not coming back after these surgeries is also distinct reality, so for it to still be there, it does make me feel quite relaxed. But speaking about that scar tissue, reminds me that I didn't tell you the reason why it was there in the first place. It was a little bit of a roller coaster of mixed emotions. This was last year, on the first time round, shortly after I'd come round after the anaesthetic. The surgeon came around and explained to me everything that had happened, how it went, and he said to me that he actually had to drill into a part of my ear canal, and obviously then after that had to reconstruct what he drilled away. And they tend to try and use actual biological material from the subject on the table to rebuild these things. And then he explained to me that they used a part of my ear gristle to rebuild the part of the ear canal that he chopped away. Now at this point in time I still had the nappy on my head, so I didn't really know what he was talking about. And it wasn't till the next day when they took the nappy off and I was having a video chat with my mum and my stepdad, and I noticed that I had something weird going on my ear, and upon closer inspection discovered that they'd actually chopped away the little noopsie that sticks out in front of your ear hole. For those of you of a piercing persuasion, you probably already know that it's called the tragus. Well, I've only got one tragus now. I'm monotragal. Because he actually chopped my tragus off and then used that to reconstruct the canal. It's amazing what they can do, but I was quickly going through a mix of feeling a little bit violated. They didn't ask me to chop away this piece that shows to the outside world, but also just plain wonder at what they can do and how useful the mostly utterly useless parts of our body really can be. But I got over it. Obviously my earring modelling career is now over, but you roll with the punches, don't you? After telling me about the excised scar tissue, the surgeon then went on to tell me about something that was far more important, and that was that they actually did have to remove some more tissue because the growth had in fact either grown back a bit or there was some left over from last time. Obviously this started the clocks whirring in my head about how if that much of it can grow back in a year, then are you ever really safe? But after my consultation a couple of weeks after, when I had all the dressings and things taken off, the surgeon did tell me that it's very common that there's some that gets left over from the first operation because there's so much blood and swelling and just, it's a car crash in there. So it's not unusual for them to come back a year later when everything's a bit more cleaned up, a bit more calmed down, and they can find the bits hiding in the little nooks and crannies. So that's good. They've cleaned me nooks and crannies out, and the operation was definitely necessary, worth the stress, because if they'd have left that, I would have been back at square one in a very short amount of time. So yeah, the surgery was a success. Everything is healing nicely. The dirty great scar around the back of my ear is thankfully not as dirty and great as the one on the other side is. And most importantly of all, my hearing is mostly intact. You have the odd situation where with loud noises, or if I shout myself, get a bit of a weird distorty, screechy sort of a sound like you do when you overdrive cheap speakers. But it is what it is. The rest of the time I can hear pretty well, so I'm going to take that as a win. But sadly it's not all roses, because I had a bit of a unbelievably stressful, blood pressure inducing disaster of an experience on the day of the operation. Because we now live an hour away from the city and the operation was already organised long before we moved house, I still had to go into town, but obviously my missus has a full-time job and she only had enough free days that she could either pick me up or take me to the hospital. So obviously I just said, well, before the operation there's really technically nothing wrong with me. I can go to the hospital on my own on the train, you can bring me back when I'm all battered and broken. Speaking of which, so that was the plan. What could possibly go wrong, you may ask? Well, quite a lot actually. The trains from my new hometown only go about once every half an hour into the city, so I decided to err on the side of caution and get the train an hour before I needed it. Except when it come to getting ready for the missus to take me to the train station, suddenly at the last minute I couldn't find all the right paperwork that I needed in order to be admitted to the hospital, buggered around and ended up getting to the train station just in time to see the train pull away from the platform. Perfect timing. If I had literally been 30 seconds earlier, I'd have made it. But it turns out that 30 seconds was possibly a blessing in disguise. Because then 30 minutes later the next train arrived, still time for me to get into the city in time for my operation. Except after boarding this train and sitting there for 10 minutes, the announcement came over the tannoy that some poor soul had chucked himself onto the tracks in front of the train that I'd just missed. I don't want to get into the if, buts and whatnots of people jumping on train tracks. That's a matter for another discussion. But it does remain that if I had been on that train, I would now be stranded in the middle of the countryside between stations, waiting for everything to be cleared for that train to head off. What I actually did was to wait on that train initially, and then after another 30 minutes, the next potential train, the absolute last possible train to get into town in time for the operation, then rolled into the station, and after that train had sat there for 15 minutes, it became quite obvious that nobody was going anywhere. So I called the missus and said that this is DEFCON 1 panic stations. She then called her boss and asked if it would be okay if she just kind of quickly took me into the city to the hospital, because I happened to have this really quite important operation planned, and then she could make the time up after work. But sadly, my missus is an online journalist for a magazine that specialises in celebrity gossip, and on this day the Oscars had just started in America, so her boss basically gave her a pretty stroppy, yeah, if you have to do it, you have to do it, but it's really quite bad, and it'll look bad for you if you're not involved. So kind of heading down the lines of, yeah, go if you want, but there will be circumstances, young lady. Just like the circumstances of missing your turning because you're waggling your finger. I think that's the one excuse for missing a turning which is allowed, isn't it? Finger wagging. You could use that for speeding as well. Sorry officer, I was wagging my finger and I couldn't see the speedo properly. Yeah, so there I was, stranded on the train station platform, no trains moving anywhere, an hour away from my impending operation that I desperately needed to make because the couldn't really afford to have missed it, as it turns out. So then, as much as it pained me, the importance of the situation was undeniable. So I had to go out the front of the train station, jump in a taxi, tell the guy to take me to Hamburg. Oh Jesus, that's possibly the most expensive taxi ride of my life. 120 bloody euros that taxi ride cost me. I'd have almost been disappointed if the operation hadn't been so necessary. Although, yeah, that's not funny. Let's not joke about that. The one saving grace was that here in Germany, or in Hamburg at least, they tend to favour the big Mercedes for the taxis. And with the motorways having their big sections of unrestricted speed limits, the guy absolutely floored it. We were smashing along at over 100 miles an hour on the way into the city, so I think we actually probably got there quicker than the first train would have got me there in the first place. You know, every cloud. We got to the hospital, got checked in, went into my room. It sounds like a hotel, doesn't it? But sadly it wasn't quite like that, because this time, unlike last time, I was sharing a room with 3 other guys, 3 other fully grown men. Obviously I have sympathy for their suffering, but it was ridiculous that all 3 of them had some kind of an operation on their nose, which meant that at night, I swear it sounded like one of them had smuggled a chainsaw into the room with him, and he just left the thing running all night long. Oh, the racket was horrendous. I was actually quite happy that I was there to have ear surgery, and as a result, one ear was completely blocked up, and the other one was still knackered from the last surgery. Wow, did those guys make some noise. I hope you're all good now, chaps, not that there's any chance you'd see this. And I was also overjoyed to be able to sample once more the delightful delicacies of German hospital food. Obviously, because I got there in the morning, I hadn't had any breakfast, couldn't have any of the lunch because I was having an anaesthetic at the time, obviously. So then the first point at which my nil by mouth sign was removed from the bottom of my bed was when it was time for what they call in Germany Abendbrot, which literally translated means evening bread. Except it's not called evening bread because it's some cute nickname for something else. It literally is evening bread. I was given 3 slices of white bread, 3 pieces of cheese, a packet of butter, and an apple. And that was my dinner. So after having not eaten for nearly 24 hours, to say that I was disappointed would be a vast understatement. I was hoping for some kind of gravy-covered potato bonanza, but wrong country for that. I left the country of gravy a long time ago. But thankfully, the guy that served me my delightful delicacies that evening also took my order for dinner the next day, and I chose the delicious-sounding pumpkin stew. Oh, was I looking forward to that. The guy had properly given me hope. Problem is, it's the hope that gets you, isn't it? Because I went to sleep promptly after having my delicious Abendbrot. The anaesthetic was strong in this one. And then was woken up in the morning at 6 o'clock by a nurse prodding and poking me, giving me another IV drop of antibiotics and taking my blood pressure. I do love the way that you always know when you go to hospital you're definitely not going to get any sleep, because they are going to prod you like you've never been prodded before. Though the best of it was, I was thinking, right, 6 o'clock, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to get prodded, smash in a quick breakfast, then I'll go back to sleep again because I've got some recovery to do. Sadly, the builders had other ideas, because it turns out they were completely renovating the wing right next to the one that we were sleeping in. And obviously the builders knew exactly what time the nurses woke all the patients up, because literally 30 seconds after the nurse had smashed into our room, turned all the lights on full brightness, the orchestra chimed up in the room next door with an angle grinder and a jackhammer. I kid you not. I thought Knobhead and the 2 dwarves with their chainsaw addictions were bad, but Jesus, what a cacophony. Again, thank God my ears were all blocked up. Thankfully, once again, the anaesthetic is strong with this one. And I did actually manage to sleep for most of the day, but it just baffles me that you're supposed to go to these places to recover, and all you do is get prodded, lights shone in your face, people building shit in the room next door. It was not the most relaxing stay. But anyway, circling back to the main point, after snoozing all morning, my much awaited and highly anticipated pumpkin stew finally arrived, just when I thought the disappointment couldn't get any worse. What I was presented with was a bowl of hot salty water, mainly filled with courgette cubes or zucchini, depending on where you come from in the world. And the pumpkin pieces were like the meat you get on a pepperoni pizza. There was 1, maybe 2 pieces per 1/6 of the round plate. Slim pickings indeed. Needless to say, it tasted like a bowl of hot salty water full of courgette. Thankfully, after an afternoon of further snoozing, I had intended to do a bit of video editing while I was in there. I even had my laptop with me, but I felt proper sick from the surgery, so it was eyes firmly shut for most of the day. But yeah, after that, finally, I got to enjoy the Abendbrot again. All hail the gods of the white bread. But thankfully, after another night with the Ripsaw Quartet, in the morning, I got to have breakfast, which I forgot to fully talk about before I got to the delicious pumpkin stew. Have a guess, if you can, what breakfast might consist of. That's right, I had 3 pieces of white bread, 3 slices of cheese. Although because breakfast is different, I actually got to have some Nutella and a little bit of strawberry jam. So with all this in mind, you can probably imagine my sheer joy and elation when shortly after breakfast on that day, they told me I could go home that afternoon. Joyous news if ever I'd heard any. So I've been in that hospital for 3 days, 2 nights, and in that entire period I'd eaten 12 pieces of white bread with 12 slices of yellow tasteless plastic cheese, and my entire intake of vitamins and minerals came from a handful of pieces of courgette, 6 or 7 chunks of pumpkin, and an apple. I think somebody needs to have a word with the nutritionist in that hospital, because surely good eating leads to good healing. But anyway, enough of the ranting about the food. It was a disaster, but thankfully they let me go home. The missus came and picked me up. There were no breakdowns this time. I think everything was just a little bit less traumatic as I was a bit more prepared for it all. She took me home and the recovery began. In total, I was off work for 4 weeks. As a result, hopefully you've been enjoying the slew of videos that I've chucked out there. There's been the second part of the Großglockner, the last part of the Austria tour, the last part of the Harz tour, the Insta360 1RS review. If you haven't seen any of these videos because you've been missing the notifications in your feed, get yourself over to the links in the top right or in the description and check them out. Yeah, back to the recovery. Everything seemed to go pretty well, to be honest. We were moved house, so I was out in the countryside, nice big garden to mince around in. Healing went very well, dressings came off on time, the plug in my ear came out on time, everything looks great, hearing tests were good, all is on track. The only area that has caused a bit of a problem is the fact that after having surgery on your middle ear, you're not allowed to do any strenuous exercise for 6 weeks, which, considering I'd been building up a routine of doing my Pilates for my broken old man back for months and months and months and was finally getting somewhere, I then had to stop it completely and just lie on my fat lazy ass till I could finally do some exercise again, which in fact happened just yesterday. And I went back on the rowing machine for the first time, and I kid you not, I nearly died. Turns out you get unfit pretty bloody quick. Doesn't help if you weren't exactly an athlete beforehand. But I tell you what, it's not a moment too soon. After putting together the video of me changing everything over from the summer mode to the winter mode on the CB1000R, watching that video back, oh, little bit of a belly going on there. Turns out all that white bread had to go somewhere after all. But ultimately, recovery is pretty much all done. I'm allowed to go back on the fitness. I'm allowed to get back on the back fixing Pilates, which is good because I have missed the feel of that lycra leotard against my skin. Although worst of all, that does mean, yeah, I'm back at work again. Thankfully still stripped down to those part-time hours, but with an hour each direction commute every time I go in, it's a bit of a nose. But I can tell you this much: if you can in any way reduce your workload, increase your work-life balance on the life side of things, oh, definitely do it. If you can reduce your costs, shrink your outgoings in any way, that you can just give yourself a little bit more life in between your work days, I can't recommend it enough. Just starting the week knowing that I'm only going to have to go in for a maximum of 3 days fills me with joy. And it also means, and this benefits you lot as well as me, hopefully, it has in fact freed up infinitely more time. Well, it's not infinitely, that's not entirely true. There's only 24 hours in a day, aren't there? But you get what I mean. It has freed up exponentially, shall we say, more time for me to spend putting videos together, coming up with ideas, recording stuff, and it's just made me so much more of a happy person. And it just helps so much with not getting deeply depressed about facing the week ahead, knowing that you've got time to spend on something you enjoy. Because contrary to popular belief, I do this channel more for the enjoyment than for the bitches and the riches. Well, for now anyway. Who knows what could happen in the future. But for the time being, it's definitely not enough for me to be putting the down payment down on that Maserati. So yeah, that brings us up to today. Up to date, fully refreshed, healing well, charging onwards, hashtag winning at life. So what then is on the cards for tomorrow, for the future? To be honest, at the moment, not a lot. It's all been a bit unknown, a bit wishy-washy, a bit difficult to plan anything. Unfortunately, it's still difficult and unknown to plan stuff because we're still getting our timetables at work 1 week in advance, which means I never know which days of the week I've got free, and that's something that really has to change in the future because it does rather harsh your buzz when you can't figure out when you want to do stuff. But yeah, so that means at the moment, nothing planned. Kind of waiting to see where the journey takes me, to be honest. Hopefully, it'll be some good places. But at the very least, I think a weekend down in the Harz, maybe a weekend down in the Weserbergland, if possible, maybe tied up with the likeable rider, are definitely on the cards. But yeah, watch this space. Just because there's nothing planned doesn't mean there'll be nothing happening, I promise. And with that taken care of, that pretty much means everything is taken care of. I'm going to have to very shortly jump on the motorway, blast the last bit out to work because time is getting tight. Otherwise, yeah. Thanks very much for coming along. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being interested enough in my health and my situation to bear 10 to 15 minutes of my blathering. If you found this video somehow entertaining or you just want to show your support for my miraculous recovery, give it a thumbs up. If you're a bit of a sadist, give it a thumbs down. Either way, I welcome the feedback and the interaction. And that is that. Thanks again for coming along, and I will see you in the next one. Ta-ra!